So more than a decade ago now, I woke up very early on a Wednesday morning to notification lights on my cell phone blinking. I thought, why do I have like 6 missed calls at 4 and 5 a.m.? I thought this to myself through a sleepy fog because I had just worked like a 15-hour day at the newspaper, and Wednesday mornings are supposed to be like sleep in, peaceful, all the things. Um, but the day, the weeks, and the months that followed turned out to be anything but peaceful. As I gathered myself and listened to voicemails, it became clear that my mom, Pam, left her home the evening before and went driving. She was experiencing a severe mental health emergency and needed help desperately. The only problem was that none of us knew exactly where she was. The missed calls were from strangers' phones. She and my dad didn't have cell phones until just like a few years ago. So she had stopped them along the side of the road during her travels and somehow remembered my number and my brother Cameron's number by heart and used their phone, despite the emergency that was transpiring in her mind. Um, she was gone for about 18 hours before a good Samaritan, who I wish I knew who he was, I wish I could thank him personally, helped her when her car ran completely out of gas. He took her to a gas station and she was able to call my dad, and my dad was able to get her home safely. All the while, my boyfriend and I were driving down from up north, photos of her in hand, ready to distribute them to people along the interstate and along where she might have taken a path if she became missing for much longer. Getting her home turned out to not to be the end. In fact, it was far from it. It was the very beginning of why we're ultimately here today, celebrating and celebrating. This is a serious story, but it is a celebration that we are here today. The launch of the P.A.M Alliance. I got to my parents' home here in Blanchardville in the wee hours of the next morning, like 2 or 3 a.m., to find that it was some sort of severe mental break. I later learned through a variety of channels that this was due to a change in her medications that her medical doctor made without consulting her psychiatrist of 30 years. So I'll just let that sink in for a second. So then you hear me say, you hear our board, you hear our organization's mission, one of our values, and our initiatives being cross-system collaboration. So see where that might come from. The Alliance believes in a whole person approach to mental health care that doesn't exclude or silo out medical care. Rather, we believe education, reducing stigma, and using storytelling will be a foundation for the future. One by which the health care system in this country will be reformed. Still, it was only when mom received a stage 4 colon cancer diagnosis that I truly realized the system is dysfunctional at best and deeply punishing at worst. Questions like, does chemotherapy affect psychiatric drugs or vice versa, were met with confusion and defensiveness and frankly disgust. My already passionate belief that something needed to be improved grew dramatically to the point that I knew someday we would be standing here together doing this type of work. And that journey has a foundation in mom's deeply personal yet systemically powerful story. Shortly before my mom died nearly 9 years ago, I asked her if I could share her story to inspire hope and progress. I left it pretty vague. I didn't say it would be the P.A.M Alliance. And despite the severity of her cancer at that stage, it was hard for her to speak. She nodded with a resounding yes. So that, again, at its core is why we're here today. Because when I think of that conversation and I can picture it in my mind and will forever, I picture her, but I also picture the thousands of people in this country that I know are like her and families that I know are like us. Those who I know are battling multiple challenges at once that could be vastly better supported if mental health care was treated with the support, financial, and respect that it deserves, with the equal weight and force medical diagnoses receive. You really never hear someone committed cancer, despite the fact that depression leads to suicide, for example, and is an illness all the same as a terminal condition. But all that said, let's actually take a few more steps back because you know I love a good story. My first memories of knowing our family lived a different experience than most came when I was probably a little less than 3 years old. Steve, it was for sure before I had my eye surgery that we remember so well. What I now know was a days-long experience with the depressive lows of mom's bipolar disorder is in my memory as her taking a nap in the back room, curtains drawn to make it dark while I pulled out some snacks from the cupboard and watched some cartoons. Dad, of course, again, much like today, was at work doing what he did, supporting us. So it's extremely important to note that this memory is not a story of neglect. It is a story of the reality of mental health challenges and how they affect not just the person with them, but the entire family and their social circles and people they're connected with. Over the years that followed, I slowly grew to know that mom had bipolar and loosely what that meant. And as I grew into a well studied and curious teenager who's now a spicy adult, I recognized that the uncertainty and emotional ups and downs we experienced were attributed to her disease, not her as the person who many of us know was a wonderful person. In 2010, 4 years before the mental break that led her to go missing, I was on a plane flying to New York City to visit Steve and Liz. And the book I took with me on the flight was Within Our Reach by former First Lady Rosalind Carter, who was a steadfast champion of mental health reform, dating all the way back to the 70s when it was less acceptable for that to be the case. And it was then, as I was reading that book and finished it, that someday in the future, our family story would be a symbol of what a better future could look like. But little did I know at that time that the 7 years that followed would be the real lesson givers, but that First Lady Carter's words would always stick with me. Now, it's okay if you're sitting here thinking, wow, that was a lot, or I can't believe she's sharing all that. That's so personal. And that's okay. Those are the reasons why we need to be here. The Alliance's core values, including storytelling and empathy, will be the most crucial as we welcome more P.A.M. champions into our circles moving forward and into the conversation. You can be slightly uncomfortable with the level of detail in that story, but if I'm willing to tell it, it's okay, and it can be a change maker. It can be permission for you all to share more openly if you're so inclined, or others who maybe thought they were suffering in silence and more isolation than they knew. And that's entirely the point. It's also Mike Veeney's point. When we sit and navigate in silence and believe that our experiences are only our own and that no one else has anything like them, that's what allows us to not powerfully ask for the change that everyone in this country so desperately deserves. So the P.A.M. Alliance firmly believes that everyone should have access to the mental health care they need to live full, dignified, and healthy lives, full stop, no negotiations, no questions asked. It fuels our passion for providing scholarships to people like Chase and Maisie, and we will continue to do that moving forward for sure, no matter what. It fuels our belief in hosting events. Today's is, again, just a sampling of what we'll do in the future, and the later activities will show you more about what I mean. And it fuels our drive to lead conversations that encourage cross-system collaboration, and probably most importantly, and where a lot of our passions lie, issue-based advocacy, where we ask legislators and policymakers to invest in mental health care improvements that lead to systemic transformation, not piecemealed, siloed efforts that are only made for political clout or checking off a few legislative boxes. Spice alert. Before we move into our next activity, please know that there is power in this room. You joined us today because you are a P.A.M. champion in one way or another, and you believe in progress and action on mental health in one way or another. And so if you tell another person about this, or you sign up for updates, whatever you do, we thank you for whatever you're going to do to stay engaged. So thank you for coming, thank you for your support, and we cannot wait to grow our network alongside you. So thank you.